Hey everyone, my name's Daniel with Cast98, and in this video, I'm gonna show you how to add conflicts directly to your rehearsal schedule in a spreadsheet. Now, this is episode 5 of the Cast98 podcast. No, I do not have a better name for it yet. Yes, I am still working on a better name, and when I do have a better name, I'll also have to learn how to use some kind of video editing software to create a fun little intro video. It's gonna be great. But in the meantime, it is what it is. It's Cast98 podcast. I'm the creator of Cast98, and if you've never experienced Cast98 before, it is a website, cast98.com, designed to make auditions and rehearsals easier to manage, easier to use for directors, stage managers, actors, parents, everybody involved with theater. If you are navigating conflicts, Cast98 makes all of the logistics around those things super duper easy, automating a lot of the tedious administrative tasks like what we're talking about today. If you use Cast98, you have no reason to touch a spreadsheet ever, and it's pretty fantastic. But I wanted to create this video series to help those people that don't want to use Cast98, which is a paid product, and they still want to use spreadsheets. I always feel like if you're a community theater or a local theater or a high school group and you're using an online form for your audition form, and if you're using spreadsheets for your rehearsal schedule, you're already ahead of the game. But I have some spreadsheet expertise based on a few years that I spent in e-commerce, where spreadsheets are king. If you've ever worked in e-commerce or in sales, you know that spreadsheets are just like, you live and die by spreadsheets. And so my time in that line of work gave me some skills that I want to share, so that if you are a director or a stage manager and you are trying to use spreadsheets, which is not maybe in your skill set, not part of your job qualifications, working backstage and working with spreadsheets are not the same thing. But maybe you can learn something. Maybe I can teach you something to work more efficiently, because that's the mission of Cast98, to help directors and stage managers work more efficiently. And so even though we're not going to be using Cast98 in this video, I'm still on that mission to help you work more efficiently. So we're going to dive into that in just a sec. I do have to reiterate that this is episode 5, and episodes 1 through 4 have all been leading up to this. Episode 4 was kind of different. I switched gears and put on my actor hat and talked to the actors who might have been given a rehearsal schedule in a spreadsheet, and I showed them some really easy ways to make their life a little bit easier, because if the director is sending a spreadsheet out, a new spreadsheet version every week with a new schedule version, it's very difficult for the actor, I know firsthand, to continue to adapt to that. And so I taught them some tips on how to navigate those spreadsheet schedules that they might be receiving. But going back to episodes 1 through 3, we started with the audition form using Google Forms, which fed into our spreadsheet. And in episode 2, we organized conflicts from those audition submissions. And then in episode 3, we actually started building the rehearsal schedule. So let's flip this around and let me share my screen and show you kind of where we left off in those videos. This is the rehearsal schedule that we built. What we're doing today is we're adding this new column to actually show the conflicts on our rehearsal schedule. And then also we're going to be adding this new tab, or this new sheet down at the bottom, called Convert. This is just an in-between situation. I called it Convert because we are literally converting all of our conflict data that we created in episode 3 or 2. This is all the conflict data we created in episode 2. We're converting that into something new and then putting it into the schedule. So it's going to be really, really helpful. I'm going to walk you through that in just a minute, but I also just want to recap real quick, again, episodes 1 through 3, what we did. This is the spreadsheet that collects all of the audition form data. So when an auditionee submits our Google form audition form, this is just the raw information right here. I didn't even bother styling it. It just comes straight in here. We don't want to mess with this, because as more audition forms come in, more and more rows are going to be added. And that's kind of the theme of what we've been doing in the video, is as I build something, I build it in such a way that you don't have to edit it as your production cycle goes on. You can build it all at the beginning, and then it's ready to go and grow. It will grow with your audition submissions, as your rehearsal schedule grows, So it's very, very flexible and scalable in that way. So this is our data column. We covered this in episode 1. There are a lot of extra fields here that we didn't just collect conflicts. We have more information, as you will have on your real audition form. I just hide those columns. And then at the end of episode 1, we have our contact sheet. And we created these 3 columns, and it just occurred to me before I started recording this that you could easily turn this contact sheet into a cast list. We could, have a new column for characters, and you could enter the character name for each of these people, and it just very easily turns into a cast list. Probably not the type of cast list that you want to share with everyone, because it has contact information that they don't need. But you could use this contact sheet also as a cast list just to assist your casting decisions. So I showed you how to create this at the end of episode 1. And then moving into episode 2, we took all of that raw audition data and we built this conflict organizer or conflict hub, dashboard. I don't know what you might want to call it, but we color coded our cast members by red cast and blue cast. We added their character names up here along the top. There's a leaf blower going outside my house right now, so if you hear that loud and clear, I apologize. And yeah, we took all of the auditionee data, or all the conflict data from the audition forms. We created a list of the dates that we have in our production cycle. And just to recap, we went October 1st through October 31st. Your production cycle is probably much longer than that, but just for example's sake, this is what we worked with. So once we converted all of their conflict data into this nice, easy to read format, we then built these summary columns where we could see at a glance how many hard conflicts there are, denoted by the X, how many partial conflicts there are, denoted by the question mark, and then the circle, the O, the capital O, represents no conflict. They did not mark a conflict on that day. And the way that our audition form worked, just to recap, is that we gave the performers 3 options for every single day in the production schedule. They could either mark it as an all-day conflict, as you see here, several people have done. They could leave it blank and say, I do not have a conflict, which comes in as a blank cell. Or they could leave some kind of note saying something about a conflict on that day. So we interpret that as a partial day conflict, but we don't know. That text could be anything. They could type anything into that box, so we don't know exactly what that says. So we have these summary columns, and then in episode 3, we built this rehearsal schedule, and I am kind of ashamed that we didn't include this conflicts column when we built this. But we talked through a lot of the best practices to building a rehearsal schedule, starting with the most important rehearsals, the tech week rehearsals at the very beginning. You see we have opening night here as our very last rehearsal. And because those can go on your rehearsal schedule first, because those are fixed in stone. You know what date those are going to happen. Everybody is called to tech week rehearsals. And so you don't need to navigate any conflicts whatsoever. You can just put those on the schedule and move on. Then we backtracked into our large rehearsals that are maybe just pre-tech week. And again, the entire cast is called, or if you have a cast red and a cast blue, one of those 2 dual casts is called. And so again, it's pretty much fixed in stone. You know you're going to need those review rehearsals and those run the show rehearsals, so you can put those on the schedule without really, conflicts aren't going to influence the fact that you need those schedules. It might influence whether you call red cast or blue cast, but ultimately you're working with calling everybody to those rehearsals. And then as we continue to backtrack, we put the large group rehearsals onto the schedule, and so we just are knocking out the hardest ones first. And the last ones that we would end up putting on the schedule are the duets, the solos, the 1 or 2 or 3 person scenes that need to be blocked, and so on and so forth. So we went through that, just kind of backtracking. We didn't build a full schedule, obviously, but in this video, we're going to add to our schedule with this new conflicts tab over on the right side. And this is what it's going to look like when we're all said and done. I'm about to delete this, and we're going to start this from scratch, because that's what I'm doing in these videos. I'm showing you how to do this on your own from scratch, because your rehearsal schedule is going to look a little different than mine. The way you go about your audition form is going to be a little different than how I did it. And so ultimately, I want to teach you how to build this yourself instead of giving you a template, because you're going to have to interpret that template and you're not going to understand it, or you might not understand it, assuming you're not a spreadsheet guru. But yeah, so I just feel like it's going to help you more if you're able to build it yourself from scratch. Maybe you'll understand some of the concepts which I'm trying to explain in layman terms as I go. And so yeah, we want to add this column of conflicts, and you see what I've done here. I've added an X mark for everyone who has a hard. Let me zoom in a bit in case you can't see this. So I've added an X and the actor's name when they have an all-day conflict. I've added the question, brought over the question mark and the actor's name when they have a partial day conflict, and I put their actual note that they left in parentheses because we need to know what is their partial day conflict if they left a note there. And then if they do not have a conflict, obviously they're not listed here because they don't have a conflict. It's kind of self-explanatory. So this is what we're working towards, and we're going to use some fun formulas. I will say that these formulas we're using today are a bit more advanced than what we've used in the previous episodes. So it might kind of blow your mind a little bit if you are not a spreadsheet person. But again, I'm going to try and explain everything in layman terms as we go. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe on YouTube or follow Cast98 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, any of the social media places. I will be promoting these videos probably periodically over the next year or two because I don't think these skills are going to expire anytime soon. And so please follow us on social media. It's a big help to help us spread the word, share, retweet, do all the things to help us grow and help get the word out about how to work more efficiently in community theater. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to delete this column because we're going to build it again from scratch. And I'm also going to get rid of this tab. But before I do, let me explain what we're working towards here. So what we've done is we've grabbed all of our actors from all of our auditionees, which at this point I guess would be just cast members. And so we run their names across the top, and then we convert their conflicts here into the text format that we want to see in the big summary. So we do all of these calculations here to convert their conflict into an individual block of information that is easy to understand when taken out of context, because right here obviously you see the date, you see their name, so you can figure it out. But what if we just took this question mark Severus Snape birthday shenanigans again out of context? Would you know what that means? Most likely yes, but if you just had over here and it says all day, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So anyway, we're converting each actor's a snapshot of their conflict here, and then we use this column to pull that all together so that we don't have to scroll all the way across to read everybody. And we get that nice summary for each day. And then on the schedule, what we're doing is we are checking that tab for this date. And when we find that date, we grab that summary text and we drop it in here. And so by the time we're done, what we're avoiding is having to do a lot of flipping back and forth between the conflict tab and the schedule tab. And in episode 3, I described that this is one of the big drawbacks of doing things in a spreadsheet, is that we have these nice conflict counters, but it kind of stops there. We are going to have to do a lot of back and forthing. And also, we don't have the ability to filter these conflicts in any way. In a spreadsheet, we don't have rehearsal groups. You do in Cast98, but you don't when you're working in a spreadsheet. We don't have a rehearsal group where if I'm calling 10 ballroom dancers to a rehearsal, maybe I am looking to see if I can put a rehearsal on October 9th. I see there's 4 conflicts here, but I don't readily see whether or not those are ballroom dancers with those conflicts or not. So I would have to scroll across and see who these conflicts belong to. And so what we're doing today is we're grabbing this summary and we're putting it into this nice block where we can see at a glance exactly who has conflicts and what those conflicts are. So it's going to be really nice. It's a great addition to our schedule. But for now, I've got to delete this, this tab right here so that we can start fresh. Okay, so on our schedule, we don't have anything. This is exactly where we left off in episode 3. And we have our conflicts tab where we left off in episode 2. So what I'm going to do is, now that we deleted that tab, I'm going to go ahead. First thing I'm going to do is create a new sheet. And I've got this plus button down in the bottom right. I do need to say, because I'm already getting there, I'm using Google Sheets. Excel, Microsoft Excel, or if you're using Apple Keynote, or Apple Numbers, I guess, not Keynote, they are going to operate very similarly. All of these spreadsheet tools are very, very powerful, and they do pretty much the same things, but I cannot vouch for the actual formulas working in Excel or Apple Numbers, because they do use different formulas. They might use the same formula name, but they might require a little bit different data going into those formulas than what Google Sheets does. So this is a Google Sheets tutorial. It is applicable to Excel and Numbers, but ultimately, if you're following along and copying what I'm doing, then you might want to do your own research on that, or just use Google Sheets, because I think it's pretty great. So without further ado, let me get started. So we've created our new sheet. I'm going to go ahead and rename this Convert, and I love that because all it's doing is converting our data. We're not really going to use this tab once we get it created. We're going to flip from the conflicts back over to the schedule. In fact, I could rearrange those by dragging and dropping them just to get this out of the way. But I also like the CON. We unintentionally kind of got a CON prefix going here: contacts, conflicts, convert. So it just flows very nicely. I like that a lot because I am a nerd when it comes to that and aesthetics, which you will see in a bit in a bit later. So on this Convert tab, the first thing we want to do, we want to give we want to outline the data that we're going to need here. We're going to have a column that is our dates. We're going to have a column that is our summary. And we're going to have our actor columns where we just list all their names and each of their conflicts all the time. And that's going to run all the way across. I'll put a little arrow there, a little nasty looking arrow. I hate that. And so then the next thing we're going to do, this is going to be our actor names. And so I could, we're going to start in this cell, but for now I'm just going to say names : to indicate kind of that this is where we're going across like that. Now I want to freeze these 2 rows because these are going to be my header rows, and when you freeze rows, they stay at the top. If I scroll down right now, you see that text disappears. But if I freeze them by grabbing this thick line just below, I don't click in that, you don't have to click in the top left cell, but if you grab that thick line, you see the little hand appear, grab it, drag and drop that down just below the 2, between the 2 and the 3, and that freezes these first 2 rows. And now when I scroll down, you see they stay in place, and it's really, really nice. So that's great. I'm going to go ahead and bold these columns as well. And then I need my list of dates here. And we're working with October 1st through October 31st. So I'm just going to keep this shorthand today. I'm going to do 10/1. And Google Sheets is smart enough to recognize that that is a date. And so if I go back up there, you see in the formula bar, it has already turned that into a full-length date, 10/1/2020. Now this is in the past at this point because it is late October in 2020, but this is what we're working with our audition forms, so we're going to keep going with this example. And now, instead of going and continuing to go down like this with our dates and putting all the dates in manually, what you can do is highlight the last date or even the first date that you did, and grab this little blue square that's in the corner there, and you see it turns, my cursor turns into crosshairs. So just drag and drop that all the way down, and you see the dashed line following my cursor all the way down. So I'm just going to drag that somewhere down to about right there. That's not quite far enough because I want October 31st. So a few more days. And so now I have through October 31st. I'm not going to need any of these extra rows that are down there. Google Sheets gives you 1,000 rows when you create a new sheet. We don't need that. So I'm going to select the row just after October 31st. I'm going to hold down Shift and Control, and I'm going to use my down arrow to take me all the way to the bottom and highlight all of those rows. Now I can right click on any of these rows and select delete rows 34 through 1000. That just cleans things up a lot so that we don't continuously use 1,000 rows when we don't need 1,000 rows. We only need 33 rows. So now we have our list of dates. I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller because those dates are shorthand. We don't need a lot of space there. Our summary column is going to be the last thing that we work on, but now we want to pull our actor data in from our conflict tab. So in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is get their names. So let's look at the conflicts tab real quick and see what I'm grabbing. I'm grabbing this list of names that appears right here in the blue row from our conflicts sheet. So I'm starting with Alyssa Fowler, and she is in F3. So I know that my first cell over there, I'm just literally copying the values from here over onto there. So you could very, very easily just copy and paste all of these names into the convert tab. You can absolutely do that. I like to make sure it's a little smarter because, as I said, we want to make this scalable so that as people audition for your show, you don't have to come in and edit this later. And so we're setting it up in that way. All of this is pulling from our audition form. So if I click over, as more and more people audition, we get more rows here. And we set up this conflict sheet so that those rows automatically start showing up as more and more people audition. They show up as columns over here. And then we want to do that same thing for this new tab that we have. So that's why I'm going to say equals conflicts exclamation point F3. And that is how you reference a different tab with just the name of that tab, conflicts. Exclamation point tells Google Sheets that that is a separate sheet. And then we put the cell number, which I already identified as F3. And you see the little preview that it gives me here says Alyssa Fowler, and that's exactly what we want. Okay. Alternatively, I could do, I'll show you right here, equals, and then you see the little underscore icon right there. It's a little gray kind of space icon. That tells me that it is waiting. I could click on a cell, and it's going to automatically put what that cell is right here. So I could click over to conflicts, click on Alyssa Fowler, and you see it did the same thing. It put in equals conflicts exclamation point F3. And if I press enter, that's going to save that formula, and I got the same output. So you could do that either way, but as long as you have Alyssa Fowler and you're using that formula, you're perfect. You're doing great. So I'm going to Control C to copy that formula, and I'm going to hold down Shift and my right arrow go all the way across, and Control V to paste that formula. And so if I go back over, what we've done now, as I click across, you're going to see it says conflicts F3 up here in the formula, but as I move across, G3, H3, I3, J3. So it's remembering the formula, but every time I copy that formula over a column, it adjusts the formula to move over a column as well. So it stays with us kind of in space. You could think of it like a shadow. A formula kind of acts like a shadow. As it moves around your spreadsheet, the formula will automatically adjust to follow you around that spreadsheet, which is really, really cool, really, really powerful, as you're going to see a bit later. I'm going to zoom back out just a tad here, scroll back over so we see our dates. And so that's all. I'm going to get rid of this so I'm not confused by that. And so now what we want to do is we want to grab the conflict data from that conflicts tab. And I'm going to start with someone that actually has a conflict. I'm not going to start with Alyssa because she has an empty conflict in that top left cell. So let's jump down. Let's do Alyssa let's do Lord Voldemort on October 1st as our first conversion here. So if I just wanted to pull that conflict over, I could do the same thing. Equals conflicts exclamation point, and I think this is H4, all day conflict, if I remember correctly. And this is H4, yes, on October 1st, all day. Lord Voldemort, fantastic. But this isn't what I want. Remember, this is our conversion tab. So we're not just pulling over the conflicts. We already have all those conflicts situated the way we want in the conflict thing. So what we want to do here is introduce some logic where we can check and see what is their conflict, and depending on what their conflict is, put a different set of text over here. So what this is going to look like, I'll put this across the top just to be started. We know we gave them 3 different conflict options. They could either leave it blank, and when they did that, we gave it a circle. They could say that it's all day, and when they do that, we give it an X, or something else. And so we'll just say, or else, make it a question mark. And so that's the logic that we're following. It's called if conditionals. And you use if conditionals all the time in real life. If someone asks you, what do you want to have for dinner? You say, well, if we're going to go out to eat, I want to go to Chick-fil-A. If we're going out to eat, I want to go to Chick-fil-A. Or else, if we're not going out to eat, let's just put a frozen pizza in the oven. So you're always thinking on the decision model of if a certain set of conditions is met, decision yes. If not, or if something else, decision no. That's exactly what we're doing here. We're saying if their conflict is blank, we're going to put a 0, or we're going to put an O, a circle. If their conflict says all day, we're going to put an X. And then if it's neither of those things, we know that there is some text in there, but it doesn't match the word all day. So we know that it's a partial day conflict, and we can make it a question mark. Okay? So we're using that if conditional logic to pull it over. And so we have to start with the known values first. We know that it's blank. We know that it says all day, or it says something else, and we don't know what it says. Okay, so we're following this model, and we want Lord Voldemort's conflict to show up exactly, well, we want it to show up, but we want it to appear as an all-day X. So let's try and make it do that. I'm going to start with equals, because we're adding a new formula here, and I'm going to say if. It's a really simple formula for an if conditional, and when I open my parentheses, if you have your little helper tutorial box turned on, you see the big pop-up here. It's showing you the syntax that you have to use to make this formula work. So each value in here is separated by a comma, and we start with our logical expression, and then we have a comma, and then what do we do if that expression is true, and then a comma, and what do we do if that expression is false? And here's an example. You say A2 equals foo. If A2 does equal foo, they print the text. It just says A2 is foo in quotation marks. And if that is not true, they say A2 is not foo in quotation marks. And so we're gonna follow this very simple example for Lord Voldemort's conflict over on conflicts H4. That is our cell reference over there. So if conflicts exclamation H4 space equals all day, we're going to say comma, then now we want an X there, and we have to put it in quotation marks to make sure that Google Sheets interprets that literally, as literally we want to put an X in this cell. If I didn't have quotation marks, it would try and interpret it as some kind of formula, and it wouldn't work because X is not a formula. So if it's all day, X, or else, I'm going to say O. And you see, if I just type O, it thinks that I'm trying to do a formula. I'd have to put the O in quotation marks, end my parentheses that I started over here at the beginning, and press enter to save that. So now Lord Voldemort has an X, which is correct because he has an all-day conflict. But I skipped a step, and hopefully you noticed. maybe you didn't. But I said I was going to start with checking to see if it's blank. Instead, I skipped that because this is a really easy formula to say if it's all day, put an X. If it's not all day, do a question mark. That's our really super easy example. But I need to check to see if it's blank, just to make sure that it's blank, because we're going to copy this formula for everyone that's on our spreadsheet. So let's update this formula to include that. I'm going to use the formula bar this time so that you can see how things adjust down here. And I'm going to go back to the very beginning, right after the equals mark, and I'm going to do another if, open parentheses. And so now what I'm doing is I'm putting that if formula that we already used, I'm putting it inside of this if formula. But this if formula is going to follow the same logic, or it's going to follow the same syntax as that one did. So if something, I'm just going to put a dot, 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 comma, true, and we know that this is going to be our blank, and so what we want to do for true is to have a circle, and if it's not blank, then we want to check our other if. So does that make sense? I hope it does. We're saying now, if the cell is blank, and I'm going to change this dot, dot, dot in just a sec because that is not a proper way to do this, but if this cell is blank, do a circle. If it's not blank, it's something else. And so then we check, is it all day? Yes, put an X. No, put a circle. And it shouldn't be a circle. It should be a question mark because that's our last one. So now we need this formula. So if we want to check and see if conflicts H4 is blank, okay? So we can do that really in two ways, I think. Let's try it one way first and see if it works. If conflicts exclamation point H4 equals nothing, just empty quotation marks, we want to put a circle. If not, we want to check to see if it's all day and yada, yada, yada. So let me press enter, and it appears that that still worked because Lord Voldemort's conflict is not empty, denoted by the empty quotations. So it is not a circle, but it is all day, so it still has the X. So let's copy this formula to another cell that is blank and see if it returns the circle correctly. Okay, so I'm going to just copy this cell, which is going to copy the formula. Hold down Shift and move over left just a couple times. Control V to paste that formula, and it looks like that this is working, which is really, really handy. So you see that our conflicts F4 for Alyssa, if that equals nothing at all, just empty quotation marks, put a circle, and there is a circle. And if I flip back to conflicts and check her October 1st, Alyssa's October 1st conflict, and Hagrid's for that matter, you see Alyssa and Hagrid both have no conflict on that day. So it appears that this is working, but we want to check the question mark too and make sure that the entire formula is working. So let's copy the formula down to Alyssa on October 3rd and 4th. She should have a question mark show up. I'm on the wrong tab. So I'm going to copy this formula, hold Shift and go down a little bit, paste it, and sure enough, she had a blank conflict here, a blank conflict there, and then a couple of partial day conflicts shown by the question mark. So it appears that our formula is working. I'm not even going to show you what the other option was because it uses another formula, and this is kind of, it's just easier to understand because now if you look at the formula bar, you can very clearly see we are checking some cell content to see if it's blank, and then we're also checking that same cell content to see if it says all day. So it's following that similarity. It's just easier to understand that way. So that's really handy. So now that we've kind of confirmed that this is working for all three of our conflict types, I could go ahead and copy and paste this to everybody and make everybody show up. So let's just do that just for funsies. Control C to copy in the top left. I'm going to hold down Shift and Control and use my down arrow a couple times to go all the way to the bottom, and then the right arrow a couple times to go all the way to the right. And I'm going to use Control V to paste that formula into all those places. And you see over here where we don't have any actors yet because they've not submitted their audition form, there are no conflicts to be found. And we have X's and O's and question marks all throughout our conflict. So everything looks perfect. And we could now we could start building our summary. And so why don't we go ahead and do that? We're going to adjust this in just a bit because we want to show this. We don't want it to just be X's and O's. We want to actually show some other things. Why don't we go ahead and do that before I work on the summary, because I think it'll be easier to understand because you've already got your brain in the zone for this if conditional. So let's go ahead and finish this up. I think that'll be best. So I'm going to start with the blank ones, the O's, the circles. We don't actually want to show an O. When they don't have a conflict, we just want to leave it blank. So I'm going to get rid of the O and press enter, and you see that Alyssa's O is now gone. So I'm just going to keep going with that, and we know that with the X, instead of just putting an X, we want to put their name by the X. So it's going to be X dash name, and that's not how I'm going to leave it, but you'll see we're going to update that in just a sec. And I'm going to do the same thing with the question mark dash name. And if I press enter, you don't see anything because Alyssa doesn't match that. If I copy this formula in the same way I did before all the way to everybody, now you see that our lack of conflicts are gone. When they don't have a conflict, it's blank. When they do have a conflict, it's still either the X or the question mark, and now we have this placeholder name text there. So now we want to edit a little bit further. I'm going to skip back over to Lord Voldemort since he actually has a conflict that we can work with. And I don't want it to say name, I want it to say Lord Voldemort. So what I have to do is step outside the quotation marks. The quotation marks is going to print anything that I put inside of it exactly as it appears. It is a literal text copy and paste situation. So I don't want it to say name. Instead, I want to step outside the quotation marks and make, I want to reference his name up here in cell E2. He's in row 2 and column E. So I want E2. But the problem with this is that if I press enter, you see we get an error. And that's because it doesn't know how to interpret a literal text followed by a cell reference. And so we have to connect these two, and we can do that with an ampersand. So that is tying together a literal text with a cell reference. And now if I press enter, you see it says X Lord Voldemort. And that's perfect. So I want to do the same thing, capture this E2. Oh, I want to do one more thing actually before I copy this. As we move this down, you see if I copy this and paste it just right here, we're getting some weird stuff. We're getting multiple X's. And the reason that's happening is because it's no longer E2 in our formula. It switched itself to E3. Remember I said that it kind of acts like your shadow? And let me escape. It acts like your shadow and follows you around. And we don't want that to happen. We want Lord Voldemort to always be Lord Voldemort. We don't want his shadow following us around. So what I have to do with my E2 is put a $ right in front of the 2. When you put a $ in front of a cell reference, you could do it for the E as well, but we don't want it for the E. It's going to fix the 2. Like 2 is now fixed. It is not going to change as the shadow moves around. It's always going to be 2. And that's what the $ does for you. It locks that into place. So now if I copy this formula just down a couple spots, we get X Lord Voldemort as we wanted. So that's really easy. Now I'm going to copy this, the ampersand E $2. Well, I'm not going to copy it. I'm just going to retype it over here. So for question mark, we're going to get rid of the name placeholder, step outside the quotation mark, use our ampersand E $2 right there, press enter to save it. And it didn't change, obviously, because he doesn't have a partial day conflict right here. But if I go down a bit further where he does, this is on October 10th, paste the formula all the way down, you see now we do have question mark Lord Voldemort, just like we wanted. So really, really handy to see that. The last thing I want to do, if I expand this out a little bit, we want a question mark to actually show up just like this, but we also want to include the notation that the actor left about their conflict. Because remember, the question mark means they have a partial day conflict, and that text could be anything. So when we're looking at our schedule and we're looking at a list of people who have conflicts, we want to see at a glance what their conflict is. And so if it's a partial day conflict, it's a question mark, okay, but when are they available, we need to know. So to prevent us having to flip back over to our conflicts or flip back over to another tab, to see that, we want to put that right here. So we need to adjust our formula one more time. So over here with our question mark, we're going to follow the same syntax that we've started to add some more text here. So after Lord Voldemort's name, we want to do a parentheses And so we want a literal parentheses first. If I can get my cursor to stay straight. So I'm going to do another ampersand, and I'm going to open up another quotation mark pair. And inside of that, because this is literal text, I want a space and a parentheses opened. Okay, let's go ahead and open and close that parentheses. I'm going to press enter to show that to you. And so now you see we put the literal text of a quotation marks open and closed after Lord Voldemort. So now inside of our quotations, we want another cell reference, grabbing it from our conflicts to know exactly what his note is. Luckily, we already have that cell reference here in our formulas because we're checking that cell to see if it says all day or to see if it is blank. And it's neither of those things. So now we just literally want to grab the text that is in there and print it over here. So I'm going to highlight that. I could also type it in, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to paste it inside of our parentheses. Now, if I press enter to save this formula, can you guess what's going to happen? It's not going to work. That's a little hint. Okay, I'm going to press enter, and of course, as you see, it printed literally the text that I entered, conflicts, exclamation point, H13. That is not helpful. That is not what we wanted. And that's because I did not separate this from the literal text and turn it into a cell reference. So I need to close my quotation mark just inside my parentheses to stop the literal text, and you see how my cell reference now lights up because it's a cell reference. But then I have to connect them with the ampersand, just like we did before. And then I have to do the same thing on the end, at the end of the cell reference. Ampersand to connect it back to literal text with a quotation mark. And inside the two quotation marks here at the end, we have our parentheses closing. So if I press enter now, we see Lord Voldemort with his conflict text that he's available from 12 to 3. So this is looking really, really good. Let me go ahead and, well, I'll leave that big right now. I'm going to copy this formula with Control C, and I'm going to come up to the top left and just select everything with Control Shift down arrow and Control Shift right arrow. Select everything over here, Control V to paste my new formula. And if I come back over here, you can see that we have everyone showing a lovely conflict notation, just like we wanted. So that looks fantastic. Let me just, I'm going to shorten these columns back up because I don't want them to be all crazy big like that. I just want them to be a regular size. So now that we know that everybody's conflicts are showing what we want it to show, we can work on our summary column. So all we want to do here, this is a really easy formula, or hopefully a really easy concept to understand. We have so many columns and all these conflicts running across. All we want to do is grab all the values from over here and consolidate them into one cell. And we can do that very easily with a join formula. Open and close those parentheses, and you see what the join formula does. Now there is a different formula, and I'm actually going to use this other formula instead of join, and this one is called text join. And the reason I'm using text join instead of join, if you use join, it's going to consolidate all of the cells that you give it, and it's going to include blank cells. And that looks kind of funky. So actually, let me just show that to you because the syntax is the same for both of these formulas, so we'll be able to change it easily in just a sec. So looking at the join help box, it wants us to give a delimiter, that is the separator that it wants. So it's saying, okay, we're going to grab all those values and put them together. How do you want to separate each of the values that we find? So we can do quotation marks, and I'm going to do a comma space for now. I'm going to change that in just a sec, but a comma space is going to look really good to show you this example. And then we do a comma outside the quotations to move into the next bit, which is what we want to join. And we want to join, if I'm going to click right there into C3, hold down Shift and move all the way to the right, all the way over, and press Enter. And that's going to join all of these values into this column. And if I spread this out, make this a little bigger, you see what happened. We have some empty cells with a comma, empty cell, comma, empty comma, and then Lord Voldemort, empty comma, Daniel Fowler, empty comma, empty comma, empty comma. So we have a lot of empty commas. And that doesn't look very good. And that's why we're going to use this other formula called text join, because it's going to ignore those blank ones, which is really, really handy. So if I press enter to save that, it doesn't like what we've done. Wrong number of arguments. So what did we do here? Okay, I said it was the same syntax, and it's not. That's my bad. We have the ability to tell it we want to ignore the empty cells, and we do. So right after our delimiter, we have our comma, and we're just going to type true and another comma. And so now we have our delimiter still as a comma space, and then we tell it true. We do want to ignore empty. It's what our little helper thing is saying. And then the text that we're giving it is the rest of this row, everything that's in this row. And so that's really easy. I'm going to press enter, and you see that looks a lot nicer now with Lord Voldemort, Daniel Fowler, Hermione Granger, without all the extra commas. It's much nicer. But as I showed you at the top, this is still not quite what we want, because you see we have to keep expanding our column to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's not very easy to look at a glance. So I'm going to make this small again, about right there, and we're going to change our delimiter in this formula so that instead of a comma, it's going to be a line break. So to do a line break, we'll just get rid of that comma, and inside the quotations, I'm going to hold down Control and press Enter. If you just press Enter, it's going to save your formula. But if you hold Control and press Enter, it does a hard line break. And you can't really see it because my help box is in the way. But now I'm going to press Enter to save that, and you see it puts everybody in a nice column. So this is looking fantastic. This is exactly what we want. I'm going to copy this formula with Control-C. I'm going to hold down Shift and go all the way to the bottom. Control-V to paste that. And look at that. Now we have a nice list of conflicts for every single row. It's not that pretty, but if I select this and do some alignment, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. It's just going to be ugly because we're not going to be using this this sheet very much. I'm going to do Control minus sign just to zoom out a little bit and show you what we've done. So we have this nice list of conflicts with the summary for partial day conflicts. It looks really great. Well, it doesn't look really great, but we're going to make it look really great here in just a sec over on our schedule. So now that we're done with our summary here in our convert tab, let me go back to our schedule tab, and we're going to work now to make this conflicts column. So this is the last step, and all we want to do is pull the right summary of conflicts into the schedule. And we want to do that based on the date for this row. Okay, so I'm going to step down here to October 5th, because to me it's just a little easier to understand that I'm checking this row date, row date, whatever. It's a little easier to understand that I'm checking the date of this row than here, because this is October 1st, which is also the first cell over there. So it just kind of makes you forget. But I want to smartly check that convert tab for December 5th. And when we find October 5th, and when we find October 5th, we're going to grab that summary block and just copy and paste it over here. So to do this, I'm going to use what's called an index match formula. Okay, and this is very similar to a VLOOKUP. If you know anything about spreadsheets, you've probably heard of a VLOOKUP. If you don't know very much about spreadsheets, you've maybe heard of a VLOOKUP. And I like index match better than a VLOOKUP because it's a little bit more versatile. Now, in this use case, a VLOOKUP would be fine. But the difference, just to share this with you, is that in a VLOOKUP, you select where you want to search for something, and then you say what you want to search for, and then you have to say which column of this blob do you want to pull the result in from. So if we're looking for the word hair in a VLOOKUP, and I select all of this, it's going to check this entire blob for the word hair. Anywhere it finds it, I could tell it we want to grab column F for that when you find hair. So here we find hair right here where it says come with hair and makeup on. And so it would copy and paste Belle Coxworth, Beast Lumiere, Dishes Ensemble into that. That's using VLOOKUP. It involves a lot of extra searching. With index match, we don't have to search this entire blob. We're able to say, hey, search the note for a value hair. And if you find it, move over to column F and tell me what it says there. So it's a little bit more versatile and less resource intensive than a VLOOKUP. So if you're familiar with VLOOKUP, you can use it here, but index match is just, in my opinion, the better formula to use. It's actually not one formula, it's a collection of two of them. So let's dive right in and do it. So I'm going to start with an equal sign and index. This is the first formula. I'm going to open my parentheses and it gives us our little help text. The first thing that we want to do is we want to tell it what to look for. Or no, sorry, we want to tell it what we want to pull in here. So this is the reference that we want to pull into this column. So I know that the reference that I want to pull in is some block in the summary. Okay, so we're just going to click on the column B in our Convert tab, and you see our formula helper over here is now Convert BB. So if I press Enter, it's going to save that. We haven't finished our formula, so it gives us an error. But I could also just type this in just like we did before. I could say index convert exclamation point B : B, and that tells it everything in the B column. Okay, so that we want to pull some result from the B column over there, comma, now we want to tell it what row to look in. And this is where we want to use our match formula inside of that index formula. So with the match formula, we first provide the search key. So what word do we want to look for, or what are we looking for in our search area? And then we provide the search area to this formula. So it's a two-step process. So first is the search key, and I want to just look at the date over here in this row. So it's cell A3. Could type that in or just select it over there, highlight it in purple, comma, and now we want to tell it where to look for this. So I'm going to type this in this time instead of clicking. I could click over to the Convert tab if I wanted to and select the entire column, but I know that it is Convert, and if I'm referencing another sheet, I have to do exclamation point, and I want column A. So earlier we did column B. This is going to be A : A. So what I've done, if I click over to Convert, we are grabbing something from B, and then we check the date over on our schedule, and when we find that date here in this column A, we grab the appropriate summary box. So it's really, really cool. And if you see the output from my formula, if I click back to the schedule, that looks really, really good, really exactly what we wanted. So if I copy my formula and go back to the top and paste this all the way down, I'm going to hold Control Shift and down, just paste it all the way down. You see we're working on 1,000 rows over here. Probably won't have 1,000 rehearsals, but that's fine. And now voila, we have our nice summary block over here for all to see. Now I don't want to have to continue expanding this column out, so I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to use my align icons over here to do a couple things. I'm going to change text wrapping to just overflow. So it's going to make things a little bit shorter, and then also I'm going to change the text size in this column to 6 because I want to make it just really, really small, except my heading at the top I want to be regular size. So I'm kind of I'm super OCD about aesthetics. So this looks fantastic to me. It is very, very small text, but I think that's okay because when you're looking to see who has a conflict on a day and you're actually using this in practice, you're not going to be skimming to just kind of get the gist. You're going to be looking for a specific person. You're going to be intentionally looking at this list of conflicts So it's okay if this text is smaller because you're going to be looking with intentionality to read it. So yeah, there you go. You see, we didn't make our convert tab very pretty, and that's totally fine. But our schedule tab is super pretty. And now what we've got here is you see that the conflicts don't work down here because it can't find a date over here to search for. And so as we grow our rehearsal schedule and add more dates to it, this schedule is going to update automatically. So I could show you this by putting in some dates here. If I do 10/20 and 10/21 and 10/29, you see it's updating the conflicts automatically. So it's so cool to watch this happen, and it just gets me giddy. It just makes me really excited. I love building stuff like this. So that is everything for this tutorial. I'm sorry that it ran a little longer than some of the other episodes. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below because that keeps the conversation public. When I reply to you and other people have your same question, it's going to be really helpful for them to be able to see that in the comments. So please drop a comment below if you have any questions. Otherwise, remember to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or subscribe to the YouTube channel right here so that you get notified when future episodes come out with helpful tips on how to do some really fun things so that you can work more easily on your auditions and rehearsals. So don't forget to check out Cast 98. You can visit cast98.com/demo to get a hands-on demo to try out all the great features at Cast 98. And just remember, if you use Cast 98, you don't have to mess with the spreadsheet at all. So all of this setup that we've done in this video series is completely automated for you when you use Cast 98. It's really, really powerful for only $98 per show. There are annual subscriptions available as well. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again next week.